I love it. Storyboards have been mentioned a couple of times throughout the evening. I don't know if it's just because this is coming later and everybody's got it in their mind, or this is a general thing, but storyboards do seem to kind of, have a certain level of love and hate relationship with our developer community. So let's just take a quick poll in the room. So put your hands up if you like using storyboards and choose to use them willingly. Wow, that's a lot more than I thought. So for the rest of the people, put your hands up if you just would prefer not to. If given a choice, you would not use them. Okay, got a few mms. Okay, so hopefully this talk is going to be useful to both of those groups of people, because I think we do have a split. Now I'm just going to start my timer on here so I know what's going on, so I don't want to overrun, because keep it interesting. Storyboards revisited. We're going to go back to them, and we're going to look at how we can make these things really a central part of our applications, which we don't fight, just like the last talk we had, but that we kind of use them well. That's what storyboards are. I just grabbed it from the developer documentation. That's what storyboards do. We don't need to kind of labor it. We all know. But the bit we're going to focus on this evening is to capture the flow of your overall user interface, because I think that's something it does tremendously well. The reason storyboards exist is because if we were just to continue to use the tools that we've been using previous to all this, then we wouldn't be able to build the kinds of complex applications that we can do today. As things get more complex, we need more help to do this. We need to spend less time delving into the detail. And you could use Godwin's law here, and you could say, you know what, I could do everything in Vive if I wanted to. But nobody wants to pay you to spend your time programming stuff that computers are really good at doing for us. And I think storyboards are one of those tools that comes in and sits really nicely into that system and provides you a powerful way to do a lot of boring stuff that you could be spent doing other more interesting things. What do they do for you? I mean, the reason I like them is because it's just less boring boilerplate code to write. The stuff that storyboards do is all the stuff that we shouldn't really be wasting our time instantiating view controls and all that kind of stuff. It's boring, uninteresting work. Let's let a computer do that stuff. It lets you visualize the flow of your user interface, which is the closest to the domain that we're working in. It's a tool suit to the domain. Transitions and flow through a user application is all about how it appears and how it looks. And that's very hard to express in a generalized programming language. If you wanted to show somebody what your app does, you'd have to literally show them it and go through everything. But instead, with a storyboard, you can put it in front of them, and a new developer, for instance, comes on your team, and they can look at it and get a general sense of where things are, what's happening in your application, and maybe where they need to look to make a particular change. So for expressing the intent of your application, they're wonderful, wonderful things to have. The other thing as well is that it ties nicely into this tip that I pulled out of The Pragmatic Programmer, which is a wonderful book. It talks about meta-driven applications, which we'll just see a little bit more about. And one of his tip number 38, is put your abstractions in code and your details in metadata. Storyboards are the details, the metadata about your application, the configuration of your application, allowing your application to not have to worry about those specifics and use a generalized programming language like Swift to do the abstraction stuff and the generalized stuff. But, and we've got a few of them tonight, I think, there are skeptics about storyboards. We have to acknowledge that, and for good reason. There are a couple of good reasons why people would be not sure about storyboards on this team. We're going to use it going forward. Are we sure about this thing? Version control, I think, has mostly been resolved these days by storyboard references and a far better file format that they've chosen for that these days. But the thing we're going to look at tonight, which I think is an unsolved thing that can often lead to some pain, is segues. And segues in the wrong hands aren't the most elegant of things, right? They're really not. See this one more time? Right. The funny thing is in the right person's hands, a Segway is a wonderful vehicle for getting around and doing stuff, right? So it's just about how you use the tool. It's not really about the tool itself. Okay. So let's look at our Segway problem. This is the Segway problem that I think we're going to try and address as one part of this, because I think it's the big unknown. There's no real solutions to this that we're really aware of. Now, Apple kind of give you the boilerplate code for this, and it leads you to do this kind of thing. So most of you in the room, stylish programs will already start to just be looking at this going, this is the kind of code that I don't want to see in my project, this kind of stuff. There's just a bit of a smell about some of this stuff. We've got forces, we've got stringly typing in there where we're sort of using identifiers to do things, and we've got, a lot of stuff that we wouldn't like to see. It's a big switch statement, so this can just grow and grow and grow. Repetition proliferates through the code, all that bad stuff. Nobody wants to see that stuff in their code. So there are good reasons to be wary of this, and I think the Segway is the biggest thing that people are mostly want to avoid. I've even seen very good people in this industry talk about use storyboards maybe for the layout, but only have one view controller per storyboard and that kind of stuff. And you kind of think, we wouldn't say that about our managed object models in core data. We wouldn't say, let's have one model per entity, because the beauty of these things is how you connect them together and how they work together as a whole. So it'd be cool if we could solve this problem, because then we could stop kind of worrying about it. The other big problem with storyboards is that when they're written like that, they're non-orthogonal. You want to change the storyboard, you have to change your code, because the two become very tightly coupled, and it's a very inflexible situation. And what you want to do is, when your view is changing all the time, as it will do, and your flow changes as people change their mind about how things should work, you want to be able to change that without changing all the code around it as well, or trying to keep the two things in sync, which I think is another challenge that we face with this stuff. So going back to that tip before, the example, the quote I'll bring out is that our goal is to think declaratively, specifying what is to be done, not how, and to create highly dynamic and adaptable programs. We do this by programming for the general case and put the specifics somewhere else. So I think storyboards are the place where we can put the specifics somewhere else, which means that we need to move all that specific code that we've got in our project, which hooks into the storyboard, and try to abstract and generalize that a little bit better, using the perfect tool for that, which is a generalized programming language like Swift. Okay, so if we could, what would we have to do to get to a more meta-programming type of approach? We'd need to generalize all that Segway code so it wasn't specific to each view controller. We'd need to remove switch statements, get all that stuff away from our view controllers so one wasn't coupled to the other, and really, truly try to go for the goal where I could change a storyboard without having to change any of the code. That, I think, if we were able to do that, would make this thing a more friendlier place to work with. I put that terribly, but I think you know what that means. So I've been working on this for a while. I love reusing storyboards, but I recognize the problems with all this stuff. But I kind of persevered with it, and this is just a work in progress to see if we could figure out some way to try and solve some of these problems. I've used it in 1 or 2 projects. I'm sure there are limitations to what I've done, but I just kind of wanted to share it with you because I thought, that'd be cool just to show you it and to sort of give you a sense that it is possible to kind of achieve some of these things, these goals that we're trying to achieve for. So, oops, that's the wrong slide. They're meant to not. See, there are still some bits waiting to come. Okay, so our ideal scenario, the solution would, I think, be something like this. This is the goals that I've got for this approach, for me to be happy about segues and storyboards. The details of flow, separate from our code, excellent. All the rest that we've talked about it. And really, storyboard and code being able to change independently of each other would be the ideal. So to give you a demo of kind of a work in progress of this, I'm going to show you a few kind of little party tricks which I've got to do with storyboards, which I think if you see these, you might think, oh, okay, I didn't think that you could do that. It's still a work in progress, but I'll put the examples on GitHub and you can kind of play with them and have a look at them yourselves. So let me just get some little notes I had up to walk through this. So what I'm going to start with is showing you the typical first example that you might have of a project. So what I love the first thing is that I can show you this project and all of you can start to get a sense of what this application does right now. Now it's actually just a demo. It's no actual specific project of any sort. What we have are just, what have we got? We've got 2 view controllers that kind of flow from here, and they show a modal, and that modal embeds another view controller over here, which is what this one does, and then this view controller just does the same, but also leads onto it. So let's show you that. So I've got my table view, segues nicely into that. Pop up a modal, it shows a unicorn for no particular reason. Next, shows another view controller. That also shows the same unicorn, That unicorn comes as a dependency injected at the start of the app, so there's a lot of kind of having to pass this thing around so other view controllers can get to it at all times. Another typical problem you have with the Segway method is that you find yourself passing dependencies down and down and down the line to all these things in between that don't really need it, which is another reason why we might sort of be wary of using them too much. Now, right now, I haven't implemented View Controller 1, which I'd like to just skip to the View Controller 1 that I had in there. So I can go in here. This is View Controller 1. So, and before we get into that, let's just show you the code for this stuff. So I go through the view controllers. So they've all got overriding prepare. Oops, you can't see that very well at all, can you? Let's go for presentation large. Boom, there we go. All right, so typical prepare for methods, get the destination, cast it out, do all that kind of stuff. We've got more, starting to get a little bit uglier. We're starting to switch cases around. Oh, we got more now. And we're doing a lot of similar work over and over again in all the methods. Let's keep going. Yep, similar code repeated. Just to do that really simple thing. Just to get this thing that I think we create up in the app delegate. Where that, whoops, not there. Let's look at this. There's the unicorn that started up here in this corner. And he kind of had to be passed around to everything to get this dependency down to everybody to look at. So that's a lot of boilerplate code to work with storyboards. And I think that's the kind of thing that just makes us think, really? Like, this has got to be a better way than this. This is just more pain than it's worth to use this tool for what it does. And to give you an example of the kind of pain that you experience, let's just try and use storyboards to have a segue that goes from that table cell into that view controller there. I just want to show that. I mean, that's cool, right? I just wrote a load of code right then, and it took me moments to do it. Again, that kind of segue code wouldn't be the kind of stuff I'd want to write myself. There's no point. But I just changed the storyboard, building again, and now I want to go there, and something happens. Some dependency is missing. I need to go and implement prepare for segue on that thing so that it goes down there and it passes all the things that that needs on. And so I go back, and so actually I've got the opposite of orthogonal code, right? I've got something which I changed here. I have to go over here and change it. It's terrible. It's a nightmare. Who wants to do this? We haven't got time for it. So we should just pick some completely different system and throw all that stuff away. Well, no, it turns out I think that you can actually improve on that. So I can't, there's no time to go into kind of the mechanics of how this works, but I'll show you a little bit about how if we get an interesting point that we can point out, I'll try and signpost it along the way. So I'm going to switch to a branch of this. We don't care about that. So discard all changes. Sure. We're going to go to switch to a branch, and we're going to go to the next one. So I've refactored this a bit to try and get rid of some of this, to generalize this stuff a little bit more. So, and I've moved the storyboard on a little bit further, and I've renamed a few things, and just to make it confusing for me. We have something very similar, though. All the same stuff going on, pretty much. But this time, you have a look at the view controllers. And the view controllers, apart from this first one up here, which get into why I do that, but that is basically now the prepare for segue code. It is as short as that, and it's the same code for every view controller. So the shared view controller is just dismissing. There's nothing interesting there. There is nothing in that, nothing in that, and nothing in that, apart from something to do with reading in the data source that it gets and putting something on the screen. That's the thing that shows the unicorn at the end of it. Okay, so I think we've improved a little bit our view controls. They're no longer tightly coupled to each other, which is one of the painful things about them when one knows about the next and they know everything about it, which is difficult. But if we ran the app, it would do all the same stuff that last one did. So that all fine. View controller goes in and out. So I've already implemented that thing. It does all that. Excellent. Okay, so let's change the flow a little bit. Let's see if we can add something without having to fiddle about in the code as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button to this second view controller in the flow and get it to push this one over here. So this screen over here is kind of like the final preview where you get to see this thing. Again, this is not a real example of any actual application. It's just to sort of illustrate what you can do. So what I'm going to do is throw a button in this, pop that up here, and just create a segue over here. Show that. And again, I love that. I love that ability just to create that stuff in moments and try something out without having to go write all this code or fiddle around in something else. And remember, I'm not changing anything about view controller 1, which is actually doing it's being the source and then the destination of that. And look, I've got now two things which are going to this view over here, and kind of storyboards are just doing all the right stuff. It's taking care of such a ton of stuff for me that it's kind of, I think, really useful. So now we'll go through, and remember we didn't have that button, but I've just called it there. It's just called item. It just works. Didn't have to do anything. Just changed the flow a little bit and added some new functionality to that thing. Okay, and let's try and see if we can get a little bit more invasive into this and change it. What if we put a completely new view controller in here? And here we'll get into the mechanics of how this works a little bit. So I'm going to change this, and I'm going to say, actually, instead of this being the root view controller, let's skip the whole table view thing and just go straight to here. So I'm going to make this the root view controller. I'm going to then make this push onto... Oops. I'm going to add a button to that so we can start. Oops. 50 minutes that was, so I'll make this one of the last examples so we can get to the pub. So we're going to push from there. We've changed the initial root view controller. This thing kind of is an orphan. It's not really doing anything right now, but we can leave it there. It's not a problem. And let's try and run it. And this is where we'll see the one thing we do have to do, but we can still do it from within Storyboards itself. So I have this base class that I'm using to do the prepare for Segway code, which I showed you, which was very, very small. So without that, it's not going to be participating correctly in this kind of solution. But if I go back to the storyboard, all I need to do is say, well, actually, you're not doing anything exciting anyway, this view controller, so if I can just make you my storyboard view controller, that's fine. And that could be a base class that you could just inherit from to just give you not that. What is it? Storyboard. Story. Can't type. There it is. There it is. I think you got it. Whoops. So, is that still on? So that's the code. It's one line. I just have to make that in there. And now when I run it, by choosing that as the class, so you could just inherit from that if you needed to. If there's any cool, swift ways of not having to inherit, I'd love to know, because I'd love to solve that problem, but I haven't figured out a way to do that yet. And now it's all participating. It didn't have to do anything else. All the dependencies got pushed along. It's just working just fine. And I didn't have to do anything but change the storyboard. And I want to show you just very quickly to wrap this up, just kind of using on an even more complex example where I've kind of moved it on a little bit further to try and do some different things, like a little bit more view controllers which actually provide data that gets passed on to other things and them all interacting together. So let me just switch quickly to the last one. I've evolved the idea of this thing a little bit further. I actually found... Huh? Oh, yeah. Thank you. Okay. Switch to a branch. We could have another whole talk about whether you should use source code from within Xcode or from the command line, but that's someone else. I think other user could do that one. Command line, yeah. Okay, so again, let's go quickly show you the storyboard. I keep moving things around as I get further into this little example. And it's become a little bit more complex. There's a bit more stuff going on. What I've done now is these two view controls we have, view controller 0 and 1, are now actually being used to set data. So you actually, by going into them and doing something, you're modifying some data, which then is something you see later on. So we've got the kind of the two-way flow of data happening between these things. So we're going to start from this point. Now, what happens if we haven't turned pizza on is we get a preview, and that's, the guy without the pizza. Turn the pizza on. We get a guy with pizza. He's happy. All right. We go to the next, and now this guy can choose beer this time. Put that in. What do we get? We go to the next final screen. Yay, really happy. So, see, I'm working on this idea. We're going to go somewhere with this thing. I think it's like a sort of what makes a great conference talk kind of mix of stuff, kind of application picker. And one last thing I just want to show you to illustrate example, and I'll make this quick. So one of the most beautiful things about storyboards, which I think is very much unknown is how to use unwind segues. They used to be really complicated, but they've gotten better, and they're just a wonderful way to just deal with stuff that typically you'd have to go and figure out yourself if you weren't using storyboards. So what I've got here is, let's have a quick look. There's a button at the end that I would like to reset and go back to the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to turn the pizza on, go to next, and then hit this reset button, and I'd like it to go all the way back to the start and start again, but it doesn't do anything right now. So to implement that, what we do to implement an unwind segue, so what we do is we go and find the view that we'd like to go back to, which is the start view controller. And what we do in here is we put, we need a IB action, I believe it is, unwind to start. And as long as this thing takes a segue of an UI storyboard unwind. What's it called? Let me just see. You know what? I think SVC. There it is. Boom. Thank you. Okay, unwind to start action. And if you've never seen this, it's just worth showing you because it's one of those hidden secrets of storyboards. So by putting just this IB action that takes an unwind segue in it, this thing appears in storyboards, and you can actually just wire up if it works. And I love now actually storyboards, you can work at all these different levels. You don't have to zoom in, and you can work at any level with it. By doing that, I can say from this button, unwind to that view controller over there. And it figures out how to get back to that place without you having to do anything. So let's run that through and see the button works. And it's really as simple as that. One IB action, and you've got an ability to jump back from anywhere to somewhere else. Start, next. Reset, boom, back to the beginning. That, to me, is like another one of these things that makes you go, this is why I use this stuff. Okay, but there's one last thing. When it resets, what I want it to do is to clear all the data down. So where do you put that sort of code? I mean, my entry point is this unwind method here. But if I start putting code in here that deals with data, I'm kind of mixing up views with models and all kinds of bad stuff. So I don't really want to do that here. So here we see how we actually implement this thing. So this is boilerplate code which is making this stuff work. So I'll go through the steps of how I'm making it. So I have to add this start view controller. Now this is using something called the visitor pattern, and if you go and read about the visitor pattern, you'll understand a little bit about what's happening here, but it's just, I'm not even going to go into it, go read about it, but it's really cool and really powerful, quite hard to get your head around, but once you do, it's like, okay, I could use this in some places. Now again, this is all boilerplate, so I'm still looking for a good way to solve this with Swift. The biggest problem is that it has a reference to self in there, which to me is making it hard to find a nice way to do this. So maybe I could code generate this from a storyboard file. That would be cool because it's all just boilerplate. None of this needs to be written. Storyboard visual scene. And we'll just take that method again because it's exactly the same. Okay, so now this storyboard, this scene that I've just want to go back to is now participating in kind of this whole system that's running around this thing to kind of keep it all working. And allows me entry points to be able to do stuff. And when I look, so all the code for what to do in all these scenes is in one file. So it's completely isolated away from all my view controller code and just in one place. And this is where it does all the configuration and setup of each view controller. These could all be split out into extensions in their own classes so they don't become this one great big file that you're dealing with. And this is kind of where the dependencies go. But you can see already it's giving me some help. The type safety system is kicking in and going, hey, you are missing this thing here. So let's just let it add that for us. So fine, prepare for that one. And here I'm just going to say, well, what I need to do is I need to clear down some data which is on something. So I've got this in a thing called context, which is like the persistent dependency injection kind of thing, which is being passed through the system. Storage, I want to update for. And what I need to do is create something as a thing which is going to clear this data away. So I'm going to just go to here, and I did write this before, vomit update. So what this does is gets rid of everything, like just clears the whole thing away. So if I pass into that an instance of vomit, excellently, okay, and that is being done when the start view controller is the next thing that's going to come in. So I'm kind of leveraging the sort of the flow of the application to put logic in the right places. And so all I've done is I've added some boilerplate, which we could hopefully get code generated for us. And I've got a home for my code that's specific to dealing with that view controller when it comes in, but it's not in any other view controller, and no view controllers know about each other at all, which means I can just move these things around and wire them up differently. I could even have a completely same storyboard, a different storyboard file with all the same view controllers, wire them all up completely differently, and nothing would be none the wiser. It would just carry on doing what it does using this kind of dispatch visitor pattern that I'm using here. Let's see if this works. Okay, so this is the start. We're going to turn the pizza on, get through this quickly. He's smiling, reset, go back to the start, and everything's reset again back to the start. And that was all the code I had to do that. That's the end of the demos. They were my party tricks, which I kind of, hopefully you haven't seen that kind of stuff with a storyboard before. And I hope you liked it because, as was mentioned, I have to give this talk at this place in about 3 weeks' time. So to say I'm a little bit nervous about this is an understatement. This is the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco at Swift Summit, which is happening 7th and 8th. And so I have to say a really big thank you. And this one is really comes from the heart because this is helping me to formulate that. And you've already been helping me do this because I got it ready for tonight. And it's brought me a long way in my thinking about this. So thank you very, very much for listening and allowing me to do this tonight. That's it. There's my details. I'm going to put this on GitHub. Please feel free to give me some feedback on it or just talk to me later. That's it. Thank you very much.